Hi everyone, welcome to the broadcast of the Google Hangout for the Learning Circles for the Mennonite Church USA. Hi
Well,
Thomas. Hi Thomas, how are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. How about yourself?
Great, thank you. Hey John, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, we've got Thomas on the line as well.
Thomas, how are you?
I'm doing good, thanks. And I don't have a camera, so I can look at you guys, but you can't look at me.
Yeah, well, I just got a notice that everything can be recorded for later playback and that it can be seen by people who don't know me, so I don't know if I agree to this, Rachel.
Hey, oh, maybe I didn't include you in the last email. Is that all right,
Yeah,
John?
no, you did include me. It's fine. I haven't. Emails have been mounding up lately in orientation here, so.
Oh, I'm sure. Do I sound really loud to everybody, or is it just me? Yeah.
No, you sound normal.
Okay. Well, good. Thomas, John just started a new job at Mennonite Mission Network, and he was the former youth pastor at Trinity Mennonite in Phoenix and the conference youth minister for Pacific Southwest. So, um, and Thomas is the pastor at Crown Hill Mennonite Church in, is it Smithville, Ohio?
Pretty close, yeah. I think our address is technically Rittman, but no one outside of Wayne County knows the difference. So.
Okay.
Good. So just for clarification purposes, because this is like sort of, you guys are the guinea pig group. Hi, Emily. How are you? Hey, welcome.
Hi.
Good to see you this morning.
You too. Good morning.
Good. I was just saying that this is a guinea pig group that we haven't done this on quite a formal way. So did everything on your end seem okay as far as connecting and clear
Yeah,
for that?
it seems fine. I forgot to grab some earphones, so I'm sorry if you guys get kind of some sound coming back at you, but sorry.
That's all right. We're glad you're here. Emily, meet John and Thomas. John's with Mennonite Mission Network, and Thomas is pastor at Crown Hill Mennonite Church in Ohio. Emily is the youth director at Shalom Mennonite in Harrisonburg, Virginia.
Okay.
Mhm.
Hi, Emily.
Hi. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Nice to meet you, Emily.
Hi. Yeah. Good to meet you as well.
Let's see here. I'm wondering if there's a way that I can email a link to a different screenshot. I'll invite people here. I'm just going to. All right, I'm going to bounce over here to my email and do that. Hopefully Randy will be able to get on. If not, we can just, I will facilitate the conversation. So, yeah. We should have a full cast today. Google Hangout can handle 10 participants at a time, and we filled that up. So I was glad for the good response.
Rachel, there is a screen share button on the left there if you're trying to show us some information on your screen.
Okay, great. Hey Merv, how are you?
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
Good.
Okay.
Good morning, Merv. Good to see you again.
Good morning. Good to see you. Yeah.
Merv, we have Emily Hodges on the line and John Murray and Thomas Dunn. Emily is from Harrisonburg. Thomas is from Ohio. This is Merv Stoltzfus, conference pastor at Atlantic.
Atlantic Coast.
Atlantic. I was gonna say Allegheny. I knew it was an A, but good. Good to have you today.
Thanks.
Yeah, good to meet you.
Have you all seen the YouTube video about conference calls?
Yeah.
Oh, it's so funny. Emily, you've got to look it up. It's they act out a conference call like what you hear and like what it looks like, it's hysterical.
It's funny because it's so accurate what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Michael, hi, I'm Rachel. Nice to meet you.
Hi, nice to meet you too.
Yeah,
Hosting this call.
absolutely. Welcome. Remind me, are you from Minnesota? Is that right?
No, I'm in Champaign-Urbana, Illinois.
Okay, that's right.
Sort of east central Illinois.
Wonderful. Hi, Derek.
Hello.
Good to see you. Welcome.
Thank you.
Sure. We're getting up on here. This is great. So Michael just joined us from Champaign-Urbana, and Derek is from Kansas. So we're from all over today. This is wonderful. I think, let's see, how many do we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's waiting a couple more minutes for for Randy to join on. Hopefully he's not having technical issues. Derek, did you join in via the link I just emailed out, or?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Good. I was just with Derek last week at School for Leadership Training, and Emily was there at an evening event too, so it's been nice to connect in person with some of you.
Rachel,
Yeah.
the link you sent out, did you just copy the link in the under the top bar, or was one sent to you? Like, where did you get that link?
So if you take your mouse and you your cursor and you kind of hover towards the top of the video screen, you'll see a face with a plus. You see that? It's the icon all the way to the left that says invite people.
Oh,
and if you click on that, it'll give you an embedded link.
I'm just trying to see if I have that.
Yeah. Like I said to those who came on earlier, that this is a guinea pig group. We're moving towards a new website, sort of a flipped classroom approach, where I'd like to take our Google Hangout Learning Circle chats and record them to have people that were not able to participate to be able to view them on their own time. So hopefully you are all okay being recorded. If not, let me know now and I could stop the broadcast. So we're just going to try it out and see what it's like. Kind of a cool setup. You can have it recorded and 100 people can join in with instant messaging. So it's a good way to, involve more people. Oh, hi, we have a new one here. Scott, welcome.
Thank you.
Good to have you. I'm Rachel, and can you tell the group where you're from?
Busby, Montana.
All right. Excuse me, I need to take a call. This is from Randy. Just a second. Hi, Randy. How are you? Yes, hi.
I don't see no picture though.
Can you hear me? Yes, this is Rachel, yep. You can hear me talking online, okay. But you can't see me. Can you not see me?
I don't see any video either.
Hey, Rachel? Rachel? Hey, Rachel?
She's on the phone.
Yeah, I was trying to get her attention because the first thing I clicked on just had me watching it but not able to join it. And then a second link came.
Goodness.
And I just wondered about that.
The others that did it, and they just clicked on it, and it took them right to the Google.
Sounds like he's having the same problem.
Now I see her on the phone in a little circle.
Yes. Oh, are you there? Hold on. Hold on. Hi, this is Rachel. Sorry. I'm talking to Randy on the other line. He's trying to connect. Oh, I think you're connecting. There we go. All right. There
Okay.
you are. There you are. Okay. Well, I'll hang up. All right. We did it. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Yay. So good to see everyone here. My name's Rachel Gerber, and I'm the Mennonite Church USA denominational minister for youth and young adults. And before we jump in here, I just want to do a little technological check-in to make sure everyone can see and hear as your technology is enabled. So is everyone okay with that?
Yep.
Yep.
Great.
Good here.
Okay. I have yet to meet, is it Yer? Welcome to the group. I was on taking another call, getting Randy situated here. So thank you again for joining Mennonite Church Learning Circle. We are starting to go to having monthly sort of topical check-in groups, which we're calling Learning Circles, on a variety of topics. And so this month we decided to talk about joint youth groups, and we're pleased to have Randy Keeler with us, who's from Bluffton University. He's the professor of Bible and religion there. So yeah, Randy, do you want to just go ahead and introduce yourself and get us started here? And actually, maybe before we do that, let me just open up here with a word of prayer, and then we'll just jump into it, okay? Gracious God, we thank you so much for this opportunity today to be together from all across the United States, to continue to talk about how we can join forces and continue with your ministry in this work in the world. So be with us in our conversations. Thank you so much for everyone's participation in this. In your name we pray. Amen. All right, Randy, take it away.
Okay. Now, do I automatically come up when I'm talking?
You do. Whoever is talking will pop up on the large screen.
I don't have to click on anything.
Nope. You just sit back and talk. Yep.
All right. Okay. So I've been teaching youth ministry at Bluffton. Well, I've been there. This is my 24th year, actually. And I'm on sabbatical this year, and so Ohio Conference asked me to do some youth ministry resourcing for the conference. And one of those things that a project they want me to be thinking about and giving some attention to is this idea of joint youth groups. There's at least two places within Ohio Conference. Of course, Thomas, his church is one of those, are part of joint youth groups. And there's just a concern about whether it's being done well or how it compares to what other people are doing throughout the denomination. And so the purpose for me having this, or asking Rachel to hold this particular Google Hangout, was to discover what other people are doing, what their experiences have been, what are some best practices for joint youth groups. I'm not sure what the experience of each of you is in regard to this. I don't know if you are currently part of a joint youth group, and that's why you're listening in, or if you're interested in knowing more about the possibilities. I think it's a real reality here in Ohio Conference because we're experiencing a decreasing demographic of youth, numbers of youth, and so some churches are finding that they're not having enough youth to have a viable youth group per se, anywhere from 1 to 4 or maybe a few more. But if they pull their resources together, they're able to have a group, a peer group for youth in their area or their county. And so it might be interesting for me to hear initially, like, what some of your experiences are and reasons for listening in on this, because, I mean, I have a number of things I've come up with as I've thought about this and as I've talked to different groups, not just here in Ohio Conference, but other conferences as well, about their experience in doing joint youth groups. But I'm most interested in learning from all of you what your experience or thoughts about joint youth groups are. And this is really awkward because I'm finding that I'm hearing my voice way behind when I'm talking.
You sound just fine, Randy. You sound
I'm
just
still hearing my voice going in my computer from the conversation.
If you happen to have a headset with a microphone, that can be helpful. But if not, it sounds okay from us. And I would just also want to say, as we engage this conversation, please feel free to introduce yourself and what context you come from. So, yeah. Who wants to get us started?
Well, my name is Derek King. I'm at Mound Ridge, Kansas, and I just started a year ago, and really early on realized that the youth groups there's 3 Mennonite churches in town, and our youth group has traditionally been the largest, and this year we have about 8 or 9 youth. But we realized that one of the other churches only has 1 of high school age, and the other has about 3 or 4. And so I kind of just took the initiative to join forces for our youth group. So we're really just in the early stages. It just kicked off at the start of the school year. So I don't know how much I have to add. One thing that made it really easy for us is all but one of the 17 or 18 that we have all go to the same school. They all go to Mound Ridge High, and so that certainly has made everything a lot easier because they all seem to know each other already. They all had been getting along through school things and sports and all that. So that's made it really easy. One of the things we'll have to decide eventually is what do we do with funding and oversight and all that kind of stuff, because at this point we've just sort of been flying by the seat of our pants as far as fundraisers, and I kind of have a lot of power, and maybe that's okay, but there's not a whole lot of oversight. That's my experience. I've got lots of other thoughts and questions, but I'd love to hear from other people too.
Derek, it's interesting that you're being from Kansas at Mound Ridge there. You mentioned about wanting to join forces. Like one of the churches I called and talked to are the churches in Bueller, Inman, and Huffingscow. Are you familiar with their experience?
You know what? I met with their youth pastor that just left. So they're currently that organization is currently looking for another youth pastor. But I didn't really get to talk to them about how that's been going. I think it's only been several years in the making. But they have been paying for a youth minister between those 3 churches for at least a couple years.
Right. Yeah, I tried to get a hold of Caleb, and I couldn't get a hold of him. But I talked to the pastor at Huffingscow and also the pastor, the Clarence Rempel, conference minister, about it, and they gave me some insight as far as what they thought how the experience went. But the one thing that's different, of course, about that than some of the other conversations we might have here is that was actual paid position. That's what kind of was interesting to me, that these 3 churches went together to pay this one person to do this ministry. But in your case, sounds really similar to what's happening with what's called the Access Group, right, Thomas, in Wayne County, Ohio. Is that so, Derek? You are a paid person. You're a paid youth person.
So the situation in our congregation has 2 full-time pastors. And my job, I'm full-time associate pastor with youth and young adults in my job title. The other 2 churches each have 1 full-time lead pastor, and that's it. And so that's where I was given a little bit of free rein to sort of do this in collaboration with the other 2 pastors at the other churches.
Yeah, because one thing I've thought about, like in your situation, and the same with what's happening with the Access Group, because there's a woman at Orville Mennonite who's a paid person who's kind of given leadership, although I think Thomas has given some leadership as well, but I think Heather's giving most of the leadership, is when one congregation's footing the bill and everyone else is benefiting from it, like what are some long-term implications of that idea?
Yeah, we've had that discussion, Randy, at Crown Hill, because Heather is the point person, and myself and some of the other pastors have pitched in to try to provide leadership more behind the scenes, but she's shoulders the burden of all the planning and the biggest time investment. And we've talked about it in our leadership here at Crown Hill as about, we've talked to the treasurer at Orville Mennonite about pitching in some money for that, and it hasn't happened yet. But that is an important and ongoing discussion that we've been having.
I have a question. Could you maybe state what are some of the benefits of doing joint youth groups, as well as then what are some of the challenges of joint youth groups?
Okay, so here's some of the things that I've come up with in my discussions with various people. What people cite.
Are you there, Randy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm getting conversation that happened when you welcomed Merv to the conversation about 15 minutes ago. I'm getting feedback, so that's why I'm really confused. My mind's all over the place here, trying to keep my head together. Okay, so can you hear me now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so advantages that people state are shared resources for an important ministry, shared resources among churches. Some congregations have had a difficult time finding youth sponsors, and so combining efforts with lay volunteers has been helpful for those congregations. It does bring kids from other towns together. There was one person, though, that shared that that's also a disadvantage because there are some animosities between some high schools, especially these small high schools. Maybe that's just a little idiosyncrasy we shouldn't worry too much about. But it helped churches to work together on something, and that felt as a good thing, and provides important peer connection on spiritual issues for students from youth who are from churches with very few other youth. Some of the disadvantages, and I think this is going to reflect that joint youth ministry position in Kansas, but it stretches a staff person pretty thin. In other words, it's hard for that person to have an active presence in every congregation. When there's 3 different churches, they end up going every 3rd week to a congregation, and they always feel like a perpetual visitor. It also takes more work communicating with all those involved. I mean, it's hard. We all know, even within our own congregations, when it's just one congregation, it's hard enough to always communicate what we want people to know. Maybe even harder in multiple congregations to communicate what's happening with the youth. And also having multiple high schools can make scheduling really difficult. Now, I did have one parent, Thomas, you might be interested in this, who heard about this conversation happening today. I have no idea how they heard about it, but that should give you some joy, Rachel, knowing people found out about this conversation. They were interested in it, and a parent contacted me with an email and said some of the thoughts they had as a parent of youth who's involved in a youth group like this is that one of the challenges is how does a disconnected youth group remain connected to the local congregations and continue outreach when they may not know how many of the youth are missing. And I tried to ask for clarification on that. I think what he meant by that is to say is when your youth are involved in the youth group beyond the congregation with other churches, it's not always clear if they're involved or not, like if they're attending or if they're going. And in that regard, one of the best practices, I would say, is when you have a joint youth group, every church needs some kind of adult sponsor or some kind of adult mentor connected with that youth group to keep track of which youth are actually attending. The other thing that he stated, which I thought was interesting, is that the missional nature of the church is compromised when there's no attempt to grow its outreach to young people in its immediate community because of the satisfaction of being part of something larger from other churches. In other words, if a church with 3 or 4 youth is satisfied with just being part of something larger that other churches are doing together, it doesn't encourage a missional approach to youth ministry within the local congregation to reach out to other young people in the community. Now, I mean, I think it could still happen with that larger group, but from a particular congregational focus, they may lose some of that missional outreach and just be satisfied to say, well, and this is why some people do it, and I think, Merv, the conversation you and I had, we talked about that, but some people do this because just for a period of time, And then it may just last for a few years, and they go back to having their own youth group again. It just depends on how many youth are in their congregation. And so I think this parent's concern was that the church may not be thinking outside its walls enough when it does the joint youth group approach. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but that seems to be what the one parent's thought was about this. So anyway, so that's some things I came up with, but I'd be curious to hear what others have thought about. Is anyone else hearing the conversation all over again?
Yeah, this is Michael Crosby from Champaign, Illinois. Can folks hear me?
Yes.
Yep. I'll just say a bit about my perspective and our context here in Illinois. We're a couple hours south of Chicago, for those who don't know Illinois geography, and I think in some ways we're a little unique to this conversation because we don't. The next nearest Mennonite churches are 40 to 50 minutes away at least, and so we don't really have a network of local either MCUSA congregations or other Anabaptist groups that we could link to, and at a time when we find our youth group shrinking dramatically just because we had a large crew that has graduated just in the last few years. We're starting to look at other congregations that aren't necessarily that aren't part of MCUSA right within our own town, and Champaign-Urbana draws a lot of folks from some of the more rural areas around the city. So we actually have a whole group of a whole bunch of different local schools represented. We have a couple public schools, high schools in Champaign, several of them. We have one in Urbana. We have several other local high schools outside of the city, all of which are represented or have been represented these last years in our youth groups. And so we have, we already sort of have that dynamic or have had that dynamic right within the group in a different way. So I guess we're dealing a little bit with some different questions, but starting to explore what it looks like to have partnerships with in some respects, very different congregations. And by way of an entirely different example, we actually have our church building is located very close to a local, and we've even done some gatherings together with youth from that group, which of course achieves a very different purpose than maybe I'm interested in talking about. But we're trying to think as much as possible outside the box when we have pretty small numbers and wondering what we can do for their faith formation and building some critical mass to do some activities and other things. So that's where I'm coming from, and I'm happy to mostly listen because I realize that probably raises some unique questions.
We're glad you're participating in the conversation. It's good to hear from you and your context in the various ways that people are approaching this unique situation with small youth groups. Glad you're a part of it. Does anyone else have any other specific questions or comments regarding the benefits or maybe the challenges of joint youth groups?
This is Derek King again from Mountain Ridge, and I was just had a question. The one thing we're looking at now is baptism class and catechism, and just wondering maybe how other churches that have a similar situation have done this. It's looking like we're going to end up doing a joint catechism baptism class, which raises all sorts of other questions. But when the resources are low and there's only maybe one youth, and the youth desires sort of a social atmosphere in which to do this learning, is that how is that perceived, and is that okay if that ends up drawing them away? We assume the baptisms themselves will be done at each of the individual churches, although we haven't even gotten to that point because we're starting in another couple weeks.
Derek, could you clarify for me, when you say you do joint youth groups, is that mostly as like an MYF event, or do you do like Sunday school together as well, like on Sunday mornings, or how do you configure the gathering?
Yeah, so our gatherings are primarily like the Wednesday evening Bible study, social event, service activity, or the weekends. We had said all along that we're going to attend Kansas City convention as a group, and so we wanted to really be gearing what we do to be formative for our group to be prepared for that trip. And so most Wednesday nights we gather together for worship and all that. Sunday mornings we're completely separate. Individuals go to their own churches on Sunday mornings and have their own Sunday school education and that sort of thing, and are involved in different ways in their own home churches. The only difference then is we will be doing like a fundraiser meal at each church on different Sunday mornings, on 3 Sunday mornings. But that's the only time that Sunday mornings they're all together.
Has anyone worked about different baptism catechesis classes with mixed groups?
Well, I think that's a really interesting question, Derek. I mean, what it means to bring youth from different churches together for a joint baptism class, who will then become members of their individual congregations. Is that something where are you giving? Maybe you said this. Are you giving leadership to that, or are all the pastors involved in the teaching?
Yeah, at this point, all the pastors are involved. We picked out curriculum together, and we will be kind of adjusting the curriculum together. We'll be working on our own, but then sort of collaborating when we can. And then we're sharing the load of the teaching. So I think we're planning on teaching Sunday afternoons, and we're hopefully going to divide out the teaching for the most part. So we have I'm not doing all of it, and yet again we run into that thing where we have a church of 2 pastors, so I'm able to do more of it, and yet I don't want to be stepping on toes, so we're trying to balance that as well.
I guess that brings up a question when you consider doing joint youth groups, is what is the communication like between the other congregations that you're working with, and how that would be of utmost importance that each person is able to communicate clearly what they need and desire, and how to work with one another.
Well, I guess if no one else is doing it, then look for my book in 2016 on joint youth group catechesis.
I was debating on whether or not to weigh in, as I'm come more from a formally in youth ministry standpoint. As of the end of December, I am no longer in the active ministry role, I guess you could say. But one of the reasons I was really interested to hear what you all are talking about here is in Phoenix, I was the only paid youth minister in Arizona.
In a Mennonite context.
In a Mennonite context, right. Yeah, I'll stop being Mennocentric. So I was the only paid MC USA church in Arizona with youth ministry in my job description. And actually, when I was, even at the conference level, in the work I did there were only 4 people in the whole of Pacific Southwest Mennonite Conference with youth ministry in their job description. And so we work a lot with groups who are in one way or another working collaboratively at some level, but the idea of a shared youth group always seemed to be a little bit of a I don't know what to say, but people shied away from it. In our local context at Trinity, I think one of the fears from some of the other churches, I don't know about fear, or one of the perceptions was that, what happens if kids want to start going to one of the other churches that you're collaborating with. You know, and so that question's kind of raised. You know, Derek, as you're leading the kids through a catechism class, you know, what happens if they're going through your network, your programming, and building a relationship with you as you're pouring into them and investing into them, and then they say, oh, I want Derek to baptize me, and so, you know, does that put strain on relationships there? And so so that was just part of our experience. You know, I found myself on the West Coast needing to lean more to encouraging folks to work together, but it was still more of a youth groups joining together but keeping their own identities in that sort of a model. And so I don't come to this saying what I did is right and that's how you all should do it. I'm actually, I hope to be clear in asking and saying how do you all navigate this, because I think that the model has some need, especially in the areas where we have lots of volunteer leaders who don't have the time to put into to this debate and this discussion, and so they depend on folks who have it in their job description to help resource them with materials and whatnot. So.
Yeah, that's a really good question. This is Derek again, and the one thing that we've done, I don't know if it's helpful or not, but we originally were saying, okay, do we get a separate space, you know, a third space, as the new missiologists like to say? Do we get a third space in town for our meetings, or where do we meet that can be somewhat neutral? And the pastors all kind of said, well, we all have decent like Sunday school rooms and fellowship halls and youth spaces, so is there a way that we can use all of them? So what we do at this point is we meet on a rotating basis every month. And so this month we're meeting at our church, and the next month we go to the other one, and the next month we go to the third one. And that includes a meal. We have volunteers that make a meal so they can come right after practices and do a meal and eat and then have youth group. And in a way that's really helped, because it's helped to reaffirm for each of the youth that are at their home church to say, like, yeah, this is my church, this is our space, this is what I have on Sunday mornings and at other times. And that's actually seemed to help a little bit. And then, you know, I can sort of avoid the issue of youth getting too connected with me because no one tells me anything, but that's another point. You know, I try to emphasize as much as I can, especially when we talk about like sexuality and we talk about like some of the bigger faith issues. I really tell them, especially if their pastor hasn't been to a youth group for a while, I tell them, you know, please talk to your parents, please talk to your pastor about these things. If you have questions for me, I'm happy to answer them, but I really try to push them to their own pastor. I don't know if that's happened. If they don't talk to me, I'm guessing they don't talk to the other pastor either, but I don't know for sure. So those are a couple ways that I've been trying to help some of that boundary setting and differentiation.
I'd be curious to hear Thomas talk about what the concern you brought up, John Phoenix, about youth going to a joint youth group, wanting to attend a different church in the long run because of getting to know relationships with those youth in other churches. I mean, Thomas, your situation, there's 5 churches involved. Like, have you experienced that happening at all?
No, we haven't. Now, I mean, that was a concern going in, especially since we consistently meet at one church, which is the most central location, and that church is the youth. They have a youth pastor on staff, and so there was concern if we are meeting at that church every week, and that church's youth pastor is the point person, are our youth going to start to gravitate towards that church? And that hasn't happened at all. There hasn't been any rumblings of that happening. So yeah, it was a concern going in, but it hasn't happened at all yet.
I have a question, and this sort of goes back to what you talked about, Randy, at the beginning a little bit about if there's so many churches that come together, how do you make sure that the kids don't fall through the cracks or that needs are being met, especially like in Derek's case where he might be the only pastor that's there. I don't know.
Well, what we found is the same kids that fall through the cracks or struggle with absenteeism with a small group struggle with the same thing in the big group. So 2 or 3 years ago, we had 4 or 5 kids in youth group, and 2 or 3 would show up consistently to the things that we were doing. And then there would be 2 or 3 that would consistently not show up. And they would only show up if they were, got a phone call and someone offered to go to their house and pick them up and bring them to the church and all this other stuff. And so it's the same story then with the bigger group. The kids that were consistent with the smaller group are consistent with the bigger group. So as far as kids falling through the cracks, we haven't really seen that. We've had someone from Crown Hill, our church, either myself as the pastor or a youth sponsor, a part of the bigger group. So we know every week who's there and who's not, and we'll talk to the parents, we'll talk to the youth, and we'll see them at Sunday school and encourage them. But I mean, the kids that don't show up, whether it's a big group or a small group, is what we've seen. And we know who's showing up and we know who's not. That hasn't been an issue of whether. I mean, it's not due to a lack of awareness. We know exactly. We're not so large that we don't know who's there. We're about anywhere between 15 and 20 people when we're combined, and so we know who's there and who's not.
I think and I don't know, I can't speak for him, but is that if there might be some kids wanting to be part of a small group at the church, but not wanting to be part of something bigger somewhere else. I don't know if that was his intent or not in raising that concern. Because I know one of those churches, Thomas, in the Access group. I want to say it's Martin's. Maybe you're familiar with the situation there. Like there's a family whose youth are involved in the congregation, but they don't come to the youth group, the Access group. And I think the pastor there, Bernie doesn't quite know why that is, but I don't know if it's a distance thing. I mean, it's all I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, if we're thinking of the same person, all you guys involved with youth ministry, I'm sure have this exact same thing happening. I think that Martin's the one youth has showed up to the fun activities. So when we have an overnighter, when we do things like that, he's been there for those things. But he's not for Bible studies. So I mean, I don't know exactly what's happening, but in all my years with youth ministry, I mean that's just a perennial issue. When you do something quote fun and something less fun, you have a different crowd showing up. So that's what I've seen happening. But I do think there is that issue. I mean, there are some kids that value a smaller, more intimate setting, and there are kids that value a larger group. So I mean, I think you can't really have your cake and eat it too. If you I think generally speaking, more kids probably desire a little bit bigger critical mass. So I think you're catching a little wider net with a bigger group. But there are a couple that would enjoy a smaller group.
Or what also does it mean to create, even if it is a larger group, to create a smaller group experience within it from time to time? Depending on how large the group is, it doesn't mean that all discussions need to be in the form of a large group, does it mean to also create space for, smaller groups to talk, or even community groups to come out of that might be more of an accountability group or small group kind of setting. I don't know.
Thomas, one dynamic that you have that might be a little different than what Derek's was, because Derek was saying that in the 3 churches in Mound Ridge, of course, most of the kids all go to the one high school. With the Access group, Central Christian, the Mennonite school, is kind of a unifying factor for a number of youth in different churches. But then there are some going to the public schools. Does that hinder involvement, do you think, with the other kids? Or kids, do they tend not to go because all the Central kids are there? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I'm curious about that too. When they're all together, you wouldn't know a difference. So when we do our overnighters and there's kids from 3 or 4 different schools there, I mean, everyone's hanging out with everyone else. There's no little central group here and different groups there. Now, on a regular Sunday evening, I don't know if there are kids making decisions about that, saying, I I don't go to Central, so I don't want to go. I don't know that, but I can say that when they're together, you don't know the difference. And I have seen the previous youth group I was involved in, you certainly could see the difference where there would be a group of Central kids and a group of kids that weren't from Central. So that's as much as I can say. I haven't heard kids or parents saying that is a particular issue yet.
Mm.
What other questions do we have to share with one another?
This is Michael again from Urbana. I think one of the persistent questions a lot of these issues raise for me maybe a little broader, but to what extent do we expect or assume that that a youth's primary measure of engagement with the church is with a youth group? You know, I mean, it's maybe a little bit trite, but you know, not all of the women in our congregation go to the women's night out and hang out with that group, and yet many of them are active in other ways. And you know, this goes back, I think, to a little bit of what some folks were saying a few minutes ago about you know, how we measure absenteeism and to what extent some youth really find their niche within their peers. For others, they have great peer groups in other parts of their lives, and being part of church for them means maybe being more active in worship ministry or more constituency. And for me, it's important, especially when I go with a small group, to recognize that youth group participation isn't the sole measure of youth.
You raise a really great point, Michael. I think your broadband is slowing down, Michael. Are you there? Can you still hear me?
I am, yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, I had finished. Go ahead and say what you were going to say.
I was just going to say, I think you brought up a really good point about that. And, you know, maybe that's also the movement of youth ministry a bit, is maybe more of a one-on-one, less programmatic to more of a relational aspect of youth ministry. And have others had thoughts regarding to what Michael said?
Yeah, so Emily here, and I'm in Harrisonburg, Virginia, and we're a small but growing church, and they haven't really had a youth group so far. The high schoolers are pretty slim in numbers. I've been there, this is my third year, and right now, you know, most churches have this problem too, but we kind of have bubbles of groups of kids. So right now we're doing okay with our 8th graders and 9th graders. We can throw a youth event and we have enough people to be represented. But in a couple years, you know, we have 1 6th grader, or I guess 2 now. So we are kind of working with changing everything we do every year just to kind of, you know, fit who the kids are. But something I've struggled with is that this church really appreciates intergenerational kind of relationships and the mentoring program and all the different ways that they can be involved to just, you know, have potluck together and that kind of shared life experiences. And so it's actually a really good thing and something I'm working with, but not a lot of other churches, yeah. You know, we are doing this. We only have youth group every other week, and we only have formation classes, which is what we call our Sunday school, every 2nd and 4th Sunday of the month. And right now we're going through a process of starting structures. Like, there really haven't been youth structures in place. And so we've done this visioning process to kind of find our faith statements and how we want to form our faith. and what came out of that was that it was a very intergenerational faith. We all form faith the same way, and that our adults' faith is formed by working with the children and the youth. However, we still struggle with volunteerism and just people being really, really busy. And because they are a small church, for the most part, the kids have been well taken care of because it was kind of that family-sized church where they were seeing each other anyways because their parents were friends with each other. But now we're growing, and we need a little bit more structure to make sure that people are taken care of, people who've kind of come in more recently. So I'm kind of babbling right now. But yeah, I'm listening, and I was kind of hoping to that this conversation now would show me a really good way to do youth group together with other churches. But it kind of sounds like it might not be the right avenue, at least for our church. I want it to be because they do need more relations. We live in Virginia. Our conference or our church is in Virginia, but we're not a part of the Virginia conference. So we kind of miss out on getting to know other Mennonite churches sometimes, and we could use some, extra sponsors. And there's more I could say. I also see as I think about joint youth group, we have a safe conversations policy to prevent sexual abuse, and I do think it would be really hard and more time-consuming to make sure that that's a priority when you're mixing your youth group and your adults and your sponsors up all the time, and you can't make sure that other churches have those same priorities that you do. So yeah, those are just some questions, I guess, as I'm listening. I'm just kind of wondering. But thanks.
Thank you, Emily. You raised some really great questions to consider. Randy, do you have any more specific things on that within your?
Well, I have a response, and I'm sorry, Emily, if I didn't quite catch all that you said, because, like I said, I'm still getting feedback. I'm hearing two conversations. I'm hearing what you're saying, but I'm hearing what someone said about 15 minutes ago. I'm not sure what I'm doing or what I have opened in here that's making me do that. Anyway, so what I heard you saying was
Randy,
that you're. Yeah.
Just a second. Depends what you clicked on first. If it's still live, have you taken your dash and put your top desktop program down to see if there's one underneath it that's running? You might have two programs running at the same time.
So just minimize your screen.
If you minimize your screen and see if there's anything going on.
Thanks, Merv. You're brilliant. That's why I like you so much. Awesome. All right, now I got now at least I can hear one thing. Okay.
There you go.
Thanks, Merv. Okay, so Emily, what I heard you saying was that you're thinking that maybe doing a joint youth group might be contrary to a more intergenerational approach to ministry within a congregational context. Is that what you were saying?
I think so. Yeah. Where do we spend the energy? How important is a peer group, and how important? Right. Yeah.
Right, because I think, again, I'd be interested to hear, Thomas's thoughts on this since they're actively doing it. But I never gotten the impression from churches I've talked to that are doing the joint youth group that they don't value that intergenerational experience. In fact, they have to have it because of their size, right? Like they have to have that kind of a church body relationship. Like for instance, using the youth in ways that a larger congregation wouldn't even think of using youth because everyone's gifts are needed, right? On a Sunday morning or in the context of a week. And I think for those churches, at least my impression is, I may be wrong, that the reason for the joint youth group is just to provide them some kind of peer spiritual outlet as a group to have conversation on spiritual issues outside the context of their congregation. But I think we raised a really good concern and a good thought. I don't know. What do you think about that? I keep coming back to Thomas. Sorry, Thomas. But what do you think about that?
Yeah, no problem. I agree, and I think having served as a youth pastor at a church where there's about 450 people. We had a youth group of about 20 or 30. And now at a church of about 100 people, and we have a youth group of about 4 or 5. I think the youth here at a smaller church get much better intergenerational experience. On a Sunday morning, everyone in the church knows them by name. They'll say hi to them. They'll talk to them. They'll be involved in different aspects, and so they get a much richer intergenerational experience than at a bigger church, where if I would have asked someone at my previous church, to name any of the youth and maybe what grade they're in, if they weren't related to them, they couldn't have done it. And unless they were youth sponsors, they basically didn't know the youth at all. And so I see that as a big positive of a smaller church. But yet at the same time, before we had this combined youth group, a lot of the parents and the youth were kind of lamenting, saying, we don't have a youth group. There's only 3 or 4 of us, and then only 2 or 3 show up on a Wednesday evening to do youth group, and they would kind of get down and not enjoy that. And so they really do enjoy that peer group. But I'm with you. I think the intergenerational has as deep or as significant of impact on them as the peer group. So I think both are equally important. I think we've tended to lean, swing the pendulum a little too far towards the youth group. At least that's kind of the critique. At least I've heard you say it a lot, Randy. Of we kind of make youth group a separate church. So I think we've leaned that way, and I think we need to hit the middle, where you want that peer group, but you also want the intergenerational, and if you can hit both, that's ideal.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to devalue the joint youth group. I think it's peer, relationships are key to anyone's faith development. Yeah, I guess I was just wondering too if anyone does like joint mentoring activities where the mentors and mentees can come together. I know we struggle with that a little bit, how to support our mentors, and I didn't know if that was also a part of your youth group, but maybe not.
That kind of relates back to Michael's stuff with the relational model versus the program model. But yeah, and we did a lot of that at Trinity, and I guess that'd be one of the ways that as a combined group you could resource a lot of the local churches is by providing some coaching, including the safe spaces information to their mentors and volunteer leaders.
I just want to say that we have about 4 minutes left on our call. And so, Randy, do you have any, maybe I'll give you the last word, but does anyone else have any other questions to add? Or
maybe a couple things I want to say, maybe, Rachel.
Yeah.
I was listening in maybe today to hear how other people experience this. I think Atlantic Coast Conference for many years, in times that youth groups have done partnerships for youth group. What I'm hearing today sounds like the similar anxieties and fears that go with it and reasons that we don't. I think the only thing I want to add to it is at the end of the day, in a lot of our congregational ministries, particularly youth, maybe we spend more energy about why we do youth ministry, and try to have that from a healthy background. We might save some of these anxieties and fears. They might be there, but they might not be so prominent. But if we're doing youth ministry so that we have family systems and congregation that's younger, instead of faith formation and faith growing initiative being the primary reason, then we're going to want to hold territory. So there'll be more fear about kids going to some other church or a combined group that maybe they'll go to another congregation. But maybe I just want to remind everybody the reality is that so many youth grow up and go to college or their career or get involved in relationships and move on from congregations anyway. So if we would focus on the primary reason we do this is for faith formation and spiritual growth and inviting kids in the community, then maybe fears why they're real wouldn't be so prominent. I think our situations where you also have to know what's going on inside a youth group. If the fear is our youth don't have a place to go and be, is based in kids that don't want to show up, your first assumption shouldn't be if you get a bigger youth group that want to show up. So there's so many other factors that I think need to start at the home congregation in determining would it benefit us to partner with another group. Beyond that, I've seen it work amazingly well with groups, churches that had just a couple youth, maybe were very involved in the adult congregation, taught Sunday school or did this or that within the life of their own church, but we're looking for a broader group on a more regular basis to hang out with. And so congregations would do that for a number of years, and then if the demographics of their congregations changed and all of a sudden each group had 10, 12 youth again, then they would kind of, hey, say, we're going to part our ways. It's been really good. Thank you. And we're just going to go back to our own congregation because it's simpler that way, and less complicated. But it's been really a positive thing on Atlantic Coast Conference. The congregations that do that, I have a couple right now that are in our team that thought that have been groups that have been 10, 15, 20 kids, and they're looking at 2 or 3 regulars right now, and they're trying to figure out how can we actually give our kids more opportunity, and that's why they're considering it. And so working at child safety, that has to be done anyway congregationally. Working at our anxieties and fears about our kids leaving us, that should be done too. But maybe we don't do enough conversation with our congregations before we launch these types of partnerships. If we would talk about all the fears and name them and then launch, and also at the end of that kind of conversation, have leadership from the congregation believe in the philosophy of why you would partner, and then share that and do the conversation, then maybe we name the fears and they diminish somewhat, and our youth can just have a better experience with more people, but still be very involved in their congregation. Just a few thoughts.
We appreciate your wisdom, Murph. Thank you.
Yeah, Murph, I like what you said about just the transition. Sorry for my grandfather's clock in the background. It must be 12 o'clock. But it's only going to ring one time because I haven't figured out how to change it back to 12. Anyway, okay, we're done. About the fact that, the joint youth group idea may just be something for a few years, in transition time, and just need a temporary need, not a permanent kind of alteration of an approach to ministry. And I think that may relieve some anxiety within some congregations, for some people in the congregation, that this is an ongoing thing, but just a temporary, as you say, an opportunity for youth to interact with each other during this particular time of the congregation's existence. I've never been too concerned about, at least my own experience here in Bluffton, with the idea that youth attending a joint youth group may be tempted to go to another church that's part of that youth group because of other youth or whatever. Like, for instance, my daughter's I have a 9th grade daughter. I've had 3 sons. They're in their 20s and 30s, but they're going through also. But my 9th grade daughter, we have 2 large congregations in town or outside of town with 400 or 500 members with very active youth programs, and she's as much active in one program as the other. Like, she goes to both, plus occasionally goes to the Youth for Christ gatherings in town as well. And so she's going to all different kinds of things, and I've never heard her say, I want to go to a different church.
Mm-hmm.
But she's kind of following where her friends are going and seeking out those relationships. I don't think it, like, and this gets back to, I think, what Emily was saying about the intergenerational, like, she values all the relationships in her congregation where she's at and wouldn't think of going somewhere else because she would miss talking to this or that adult, even besides other youth. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but...
Well, thank you all for joining in on this conversation. The conversation continues, and the ministry context that we're each working in is unique for our own areas, and I pray for each of you that you'll have wisdom for discernment as you continue to move forward and figure out where the Spirit might be leading you regarding joining forces with other youth groups or working at more intergenerational youth ministry within your own congregation. So thank you all for joining in on this very first learning circle. Like I said, and I just have a few housekeeping announcements here. We are hoping to do similar conversations like this once a month in preparation for our new Mennonite Church USA website that will be launching in Kansas City. That's technically right now called The Gathering Place, which we're hoping to bring youth leaders together to not only have content and resources available, but to also have a flipped classroom approach where we can interact and engage with one another too. So spread the word. We're looking forward for that. That will be coming out soon, as well as Youth Ministry Council, which is happening April 19th to 21st at Spruce Lake Retreat Center in Eastern Pennsylvania. So hopefully you all have seen an invitation to that. That's an annual gathering for all different types of youth leaders in their church to talk about the latest in the culture in the world and youth ministry. So this year we're talking about race and racism, and I think we'll have a really meaningful time together. So all are invited to come. So yes, if there's not anything else, any final words?
Well, just thank you, Rachel, for helping to pull this together.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel.
Thanks to each of you for taking this time out of your day. And yes, we will be in touch. So blessings to you. Thank you.
Thanks all.
Goodbye.